Hello, hello. Welcome back, ladies. And I hope everyone is well. We are here today. It's a special moment because we get to talk to Edie. I'm so excited. Thank you for sharing your knowledge with us ahead of time. I'm already thanking you and your wisdom because I
Oh,
know you have a lot of that, girl. Yeah, let's get started. Tell us, Edie's, what is it you focus on? What is and why? Why? I think
oh,
what matters the most is why because there's a good story behind it.
oh man. Well, where do I begin? So, as you all know, my name is Edie's, right? I am a joyful surrender coach and I help Latinas be able to let go of control and trust themselves and start aligning to a life that they truly desire. And what's the whole why behind it, right? I think there's so many moments of my whys as to what led me to where I'm at today. Because I didn't start off that way, being in the title of a surrender coach. It was just a life coach. But the most pivotal moment that I can always think of is it's always my Grand Canyon story.
Mhm.
That was such a transformational journey for me, just because of the fact that I knew I was meant for more. And I think there's a lot of Latinas who have lived a life where they check off the boxes. They're the high overachievers, and they're the ones that are like, I've done X, Y, and Z, but why do I feel like something's missing? And I started feeling that early, early on. Like, I remember being in my career in teaching and being like, is this really it? But then I just kept going, through because I was like, I work so hard to be here. I'm really good at what I do. So, it was kind of very silent, but the nudges got louder and louder and louder. And then I started my healing journey back in 2021, really like my transformation period. I would call it that. And it just started awakening a lot of things for me. But that Grand Canyon was in 2021 too. And I just remember being at home, drinking my cafecito, doing a meditation. And that nudge became like super loud. It was the loudest whisper of like, there's more to our life and this just isn't it. And I just remember being like, oh shoot, I am just gonna follow this and go to the Grand Canyon. And I kid you not, that trip changed everything for me. Like I knew that it was time to move differently in my life. And it was scary because a lot of my friends weren't doing that around me. Like I would talk about these things and they just didn't get it. And the more and more I talked to people around me, nobody got it. They understood, but they were scared. Like they didn't want to move out of things because they were comfortable, which is okay, right? Like I want to remind the listeners that if you're in a stage in your life where you're comfortable, it's fine. But there are moments within each and one of us, and you'll know when that is, where you decide to move differently in life because it just hits drastically. I just remember that's when I started really going into like my healing journey and just being able to be like, all right, it's time to let go and just kind of just trust my journey in that. And so, yeah, I made a lot of pivotal moves. I left the Bay Area, which was my home forever. I moved to a different state. And when I think about the recap in my life, I've moved twice to a different state. And
Mhm.
all of that required me to surrender. And I had no idea what surrender was because in the very beginning, surrender to me was, yo, like that's kind of weak. Like I have to just like wave the flag and say, okay, I give up. Here you go. Like life, I no longer want to do this. But through those trials and like, experiences, I really did learn the true meaning of surrender, which meant like trusting the journey, even when we don't know what the outcomes are going to be. Because there were so many situations where when I left the Bay Area and I switched to a career that, I never thought I was going to be in, I was like, what am I doing? Like fear came upon me, anxiety came up upon me. But the more and more I was in those moments, I had to trust myself because I was like, all right, we left for a reason and now we're going to keep going and just let's see how life unfolds. And based on all that, it just allowed me to really like step into my own truest power. And as I stepped in every level of it, like it's tested me in many ways. Like you have to be very careful with the title you give yourself because
Mhm.
again, like it tests you in so many ways, but in the best way possible. And even in this new level where I'm at right now, I'm starting to learn that surrender isn't just about trusting the journey, but also learning that things can coexist. Like the things that we go through, the pain, the quote unquote suffering that it feels like you no longer want to be there and you just want to cry, like all these different sad, frustrating emotions can also coexist with the joy that comes in life when we allow ourselves to be present and allow ourselves to just experience things that we want to be more in alignment with. It's kind of like the seasons too, where you're going through the winter and the spring and the summer and the fall. Surrender is all of that when you're able to receive it. And that's the beautiful part. And because of my journey and because of how I felt so alone for a long time, knowing that this was something that I was going through and people around me, I felt like in the moment didn't understand. It's not that they didn't understand, they were afraid because they didn't know what was possible on the other side. And that's why I do the work that I do because I want to show women, especially women of color, that there is another way of living. We don't have to live in this place of control or checking off the to do list and feeling unfulfilled and being okay with feeling unfulfilled. Like, we are meant to do more than that. Like, our ancestors went through so much to get us to where we're at today, not to just live simple lives or like, comfortable lives or something that we're not happy with. We're meant to live our fullest, most aligned lives. And that happens when you let go of control and when you trust your journey. And that's what I do with the women that I work with. And that's what I want to show more women that it is possible. But in order to get to that other side, we do have to surrender. We do have to learn to trust ourselves. And we just have to learn to trust the journey as well. That was really long, but
Oh
I felt like
god.
that was really hard to like break down.
So, I guess the big question is, how do you actually trust the journey? Because I feel like someone listening to this could be like, "That just sounds so scary. How do we actually trust the journey and surrender?" What does that look like?
Oh, that's so good. Well, it varies from person to person, let me tell you, because it's going to require you to be radically honest first. And I think a lot of us are not honest with how we feel and accepting what comes up because we tend to judge, especially as women of color, we judge what comes up because I don't know about you all, but like I grew up in a home where thankfully I had good family members, but there were times where my feelings were not always accepted. And so if I showed a little too much emotion or unfulfillment, it was like, hey, no, you got to power through. Tú ponte las pilas and échale para adelante, right? It doesn't give you really time to process, like, oh, well, it's because I don't really like this or whatnot. So a lot of us, we move in that momentum in life where we're like, we just got to keep going, keep going, keep going. And when you're radically honest, right? It requires you to also slow down. Like you have to slow down on purpose with life to be like, all right, what noise is around me that's making me distracted? Once you identify that and you give yourself time for stillness, like for me, it started off with 2 minutes in the morning, right? Because you can't just go from like, I'm going to sit in full hum meditation mode and let the whispers come in. Because guess what? When you don't know how to hear your own intuition or your inner voice, or if you let God or whoever you believe in guide you, right? It's going to be really hard to hear the whispers because you've been distracted by the buzz noise that's around in the world. So it requires some discipline in that where you give yourself time and practice. The key is practice. Like, practice on giving yourself that stillness time, even if it's 2 minutes in your bed and you're just like, all right, let me connect with my heart. How do I feel? What's coming up? Okay, cool. And extending that time and period of time, right? That's why as I mentioned my story, when I was able to do meditation, it took time to get to that moment. And I don't want you to also think like I was just sitting there like Rafiki. I don't know if you guys have ever seen the Lion
Oh
King where
my
he's
gosh,
just sitting
yes.
there. Yeah, definitely not that. I like to move my body. Like I like to like just allow myself to feel the music, and that's how I started learning. Like I feel sensations in my body. I hear my thoughts coming through, or at least I thought it was my thoughts, but it comes in a peaceful wave where it was like, oh wait, that's actually my intuition speaking. Or when I feel nudges or like those tingly sensations in my body where I'm like, okay, maybe my ancestors are here guiding me and trying to get me to think of something. Or maybe I see a hummingbird outside the window where I'm like, okay, I'm being directed in whatever way, right? Like those are the signs that you get to start learning about yourself, where you get to start trusting your journey because then you're allowing the noise to quiet down for you to actually be observant with what is being communicated around you through your environment. And I'm huge on energy, and I feel like whether you know this or not, God, universe, whatever you believe in talks to you in so many ways. It could be from music, it could be from pictures, it could be something that maybe you were thinking of and you go on Instagram and you finally see the message and you're like, "Oh crap, like How did it know, right? Or you're just walking around and you bump into a stranger and they give you the message that you need. That, my friends, is like learning to trust the journey because you are being divinely guided by some sort of higher power, but also like it's an opportunity to learn about who you are in your core and how to trust that inner voice that comes out or the intuition, right? However, you define that for yourself. There's so many elements there, right? But it requires practice. I think that's the key thing, practice.
Mm,
Allow yourself to identify what noises are blocking you from hearing yourself and then create some stillness time because then that stillness time can be through a form of a walk, it could be through music, just connecting with yourself. That's the biggest key thing. And I think when people think stillness, they think again being still with your body and being stiff, but really in reality stillness is the opportunity to create relationship with self, and that's super important. So I think that's how we get better at trusting ourselves and the journey, because then once we get to see a lot of that unfold and it just feels like you're in alignment, you start to trust it a little bit more, right? Kind of like in that when you're in a relationship, let's say your partner is doing all the right things and they create a nice environment for you to come in where you feel soft and you can just land in there. It's because you see it through the actions that they're doing that makes you feel safe. So then you trust them. It's the
mhm.
same thing when you're building a relationship with self and trying to strengthen your intuition. You have to cultivate the environment to allow that trust to actually begin and to unfold and become stronger.
Oh, Edie's.
Yeah.
Corazón.
But yeah, I feel like that's how we get better and better in time, though.
I hear you on the self relationship and I deal with that through my clients as well. Like it starts with yourself. Everything starts with yourself,
Yeah.
right? You want to heal yourself in any way possible, it starts with you. I find it that that's such a hard task for us women of color. Why do you
Yeah.
think that is?
Oh, that's a good question. Oh my God. Okay. It could go in so many ways. It's just think of your inner niña. This is where I want you to think of like little Tati, little Lupe, little Iris, little insert your name here. Depending on how you grew up in your environment, a lot of us didn't get those opportunities, especially as women of color, to start building relationship to self, especially because society also has expectations of what a woman should be. So on top of that, you have your household expectations, then you got societies. And it makes it really hard because then the women who are mentoring you, they've never seen that on what do you mean trusting yourself? You have to be like this because then one day you'll be a wife or one day you're going to be a working mom and you got to make sure that you take care of the kids and the attention goes to everybody else but ourselves. So we're
Mm,
not taught as little girls to take care of ourselves first and then take care of others. So it makes it really hard that as the adult versions of us come into this world, what's the main focus that we do? We're taking care of other people besides ourselves. Let's say if you were the little child, little Tati who spoke up for what she believed in and then she got reprimanded every time and was like, hey, tú no puedes decir eso, las niñas no dicen eso, calladita te ves más bonita. We start to silence those voices that those little girls had, and women of color face that more, I believe. And it's really, really hard to then trust that inner voice because then you're like, dude, well, I don't even know what my inner voice is. Or like, is that really me speaking? Or is that like the world speaking? You start to self doubt yourself a little bit sometimes, especially when you're now giving the
mm,
opportunity to actually cultivate those skills in an environment that is supposed to feel safe in the beginning. It's super, super hard. And I see that with my clients all the time too, where they're like, I didn't have the opportunity to do that. A lot of that comes through it. And I think it's really hard for women of color because we just did not have the opportunities. And I think that the women that did have those opportunities are the ones that we see who are bold, who are living their best lives, that they know who they are at their
mm,
core and they don't let anybody stop them, right? They align to the right people. They find the right partnerships who can accept them for who they truly are. And for a lot of us who have not received that, and I say a lot of us because I feel like that was me to some capacity, right? Or depending on maybe a life experience where you maybe did have the freedom, but then at some point you had to just grow up and you didn't have a choice to take care of yourself anymore. That can also come through maybe your teenage phases, right? Like that happened to me. I wouldn't say a lot of it happened as a niña, there, even though there are times that I can identify certain parts. But for me, it was that 16-year-old me where I was like, man, I can't think about myself anymore. I have to think about my family. My family comes first. And I had to quiet all of that down. And then a lot of us, we go back into the logical brain of like, well, this is how I'm supposed to do things. let me check off things because I need to get to this place. My parents worked so hard, blah, blah, blah. There's like so many narratives that go into it. So when we look at the root, I would really ask for those of you who are thinking like, whoa, what's my resistance? Or like, what happened? Like, what blocked me from being able to trust myself? Check in with your inner Nina. Ask herself if she was able to really speak up in times and what happened when she did. Was she able to share her opinions or told to be just quiet because that's not what little girls say or women say? What if you like stood up and advocated, right? And maybe it was through machismo where you're like, eso no está bien, and then you got reprimanded. Ask yourself those things because that's really tough. But it's necessary because then it allows us to have the self compassion to understand why we can't hear our voice just yet.
So I'm hearing you say that in order to trust the journey, in order to really surrender, we first need to radically accept and radically be honest with ourselves. We need to practice stillness. We need to come into connecting with our hearts. We need to access our inner niña. We need
Mm.
to practice slowing down. We need to listen to the signs of the universe or God or whatever it is that you believe in. And that all, a combination of all of that is going to help you really surrender into, I almost think of like just surrendering to life in a way so that you can really just go through life with more ease and more flow. And like, I kind of think of that like when I think of surrender, it's more of like I just ease into life.
Mhm.
Is that
Yes,
right?
100%. Oh, 100%. Yes,
Okay.
you nailed that to the T. And if my clients were here, they would say the exact same thing.
Mhm.
It's about easing in, right? And easing in doesn't mean that it's easy. I want to remind everybody that easing in means allowing yourself to be flexible, allowing yourself to now be the scientist of your life, where you get to re explore and be curious and give yourself opportunities that you didn't once have before and just see what comes out of it. Right. And again, like I tell my clients, there's no such thing as a wrong choice. It's just knowing yourself better. It's like, okay, I learned that I didn't like that experience. I'm not going to do it again. And giving yourself permission to just say, I just didn't like it and I'm not going to do it again without reprimanding yourself, without judging yourself, without being like, I should have known better. No, because that language doesn't get us anywhere either, right? It doesn't serve our heart space. It doesn't serve our whole like spiritual being. Like it just doesn't help us heal. But when we go in a place of becoming a scientist and just letting things come up and just explore what's the outcomes and what we like and what we don't like, then we start to move into the direction of finding more alignment and fulfillment, which just means trusting the journey and life itself. So
Mhm.
you
Oh,
got that
wait.
right though.
Oh,
I
I
felt like
love
you
that.
just coached me because
Oh.
I always say I always say, "Oh, you should have known better, Lupe." Like, hello. But you're right. That's not being nice to ourselves. That's
Mm-mm.
not at all. And that's something probably growing up I heard a lot. So, of course, how can I not help but say the same thing to myself? So, rewriting that story, like you said, of like my inner Nina. Oh, she needs a lot of
Yeah.
healing.
Oh,
Uh, yeah,
no.
we all do, right? And I feel like it's always gonna come in layers. And I'm a big movie girl, so I'm gonna just drop my analogies of like Shrek. I want you to think of surrendering like that, where Donkey's telling him like, "You gotta heal your layers, onion boy." We're onions, y'all, and we have a bunch of layers. And if you've noticed, the onion has like a little clear layer to it too. And sometimes that's how your surrender journey is gonna come up. And there are going to be times where you do revisit different versions of your inner niña. Maybe it's like 6-year-old Lupe, maybe it's 10-year-old Tati, 16-year-old Edie's, right? There are so many different phases, but when you go in a place of self compassion, like you said, Lupe, without judgment, without being mean to ourselves, and learning how to rewrite that language, right? Because again, at the end of the day, I believe in love so much, and love is so important when we integrate that for ourselves. And so that is like the best form of healing, honestly, especially when you're trying to embrace the surrender journey, where you have to allow yourself to be self compassionate and say, you know what? I didn't know what I didn't know back then because I was trusting my elders around me. But now I get to rewrite that story and heal that, 6, 10, 16-year-old versions of me. And reminding myself that I also got it. Like I got us, right? I always think about that song like with Camilo, Querido Yo. I don't know if you guys have heard it, but It's such a beautiful song. And it's reminding ourselves too that those past versions of us have allowed you to get to where you're at today. And how beautiful is it that you get to create and be aware of what you want to change and that you can rewrite your story at any time. And
Yeah.
surrender is just that, like allowing yourself to just rewrite your story and thanking the past versions of you for handling all the craziness that they had to handle to get to where you're at today.
That's so true. And you mentioned like the compassion part, and I feel like that's so essential, but I think that also comes with loving yourself.
Mhm.
And I don't know how important that is, but I think it is. And
That's
you
very
tell me
important.
your opinion. And also, then how does one fall in love with themselves?
Let me
Mm.
ask you this, Lupe. How do you fall in love with your partner?
Ooh,
Getting to
mic
know
drop.
them. Mhm.
Love that. That was so good. I love that.
Yep.
Yes.
Yeah. Yep.
And I only say it like that, right?
Yeah.
Because when we are in relationship with people, whether it's our family or our partners, we do everything possible, right? We get creative, we plan dates, we cook them meals, we do
Mhm.
all the stuff, and we even create quality time for those people. We start to learn their language. We make it a priority. It's the same thing for us.
Mhm.
And allow yourself to go on those solo dates. Allow yourself to
Love that.
start doing the things that you always wanted to do. Like if you have a bucket list, I have one, right? Or like if you have a vision board, be intentional with, making the time to be like, you know what? If I want to go to the movies by myself and just know what that feels like, I'm going to treat myself to that. Does it feel awkward at first? Yeah, because you have never done that before. But then that's again like putting on that scientist hat of being like, let's just go in and see what happens. I'm going to get my nachos with the jalapenos on the side and my Slurpee, like, that's how you do it. And that's how you get to know more of yourself. Or there's so many fun things out there now where you could do solo dates and they have like journals or like little scratch offs of activities that you can do. You can do things like that. But it's about creating the time for yourself, right? Because the more that you start doing that, guess what happens? You get to learn more about who you are in this season and you start to embrace that and you start becoming more firm on this is who I am and I actually love it. So when anybody comes your way and is like, I don't like that, then you start to learn, like, but I love me though. And if you love me, hopefully you can accept me in this journey. If not, then it's not in alignment, right? Little things like that. But just like how we do it with our partners and our families, and we make the time to do that, I recommend you guys do the same because that is something that changes so beautifully and it allows you to just get to know yourself. And I can testify to that because that's how I started my journey, going on more solo dates, going to
Mhm.
coffee shops and journaling and just people watching and all that. And I got to learn more about myself, or even something as simple as driving. Like I would always rely on my GPS. And again, only do this if you feel comfortable with it. Don't be me because I wanted to test everything. Okay. But I was like, you know what? Today I'm just going to learn how to like drive on my own and just get to know my neighborhood. And if worst case scenario, I get lost, then I can put the GPS back. But I would allow myself to trust like what came up. Like, do I want to go left? Do I want to go right? Same with the walks. Like I would take different routes just to learn how to build that self trust within me. And sometimes, you guys, the best adventures came through that. I would find a dope coffee shop. I would bump into amazing people. There would be a class happening, and I was like, oh, I wonder if they're taking people in, and let me just go in there. Like it's giving yourself that opportunity, and it's the most beautiful thing. But again, like just like how we do that with our partnerships, where we find a cool thing to do with them, and we're like, we're going to surprise them and we're going to have such a great time, which usually ends up being a great time. Do that for
Mhm.
yourself.
Yeah, fun fact, when I started dating myself, shortly after, I met the love of my life. So
Oh,
it is
yes. I
only when I
love
started dating
that.
myself that I was like, I know what I want, I know what I like, this is who I am. This
Exactly.
But
is who I
it's so
present to you.
true.
Yes.
Yes.
But I do like
Exactly.
that concept of just randomly doing things because I'm a big planner. And so when it comes to dating, like I'm going to plan the date. We're going to go from here and then it's going to take us X amount to go to here. And we should just go with the flow. Just go with the flow.
Yeah, just go with the flow. And
Mhm.
even then, right? If you are the planner who is like, but dude, that gives me a lot of resistance. Like, I need to plan. Okay, cool. Like, plan the event, but then just see what's around and just be spontaneous. Give yourself the opportunity to just see, like, what's around me, and see where that takes you. You never know.
And I think going back to the planning part, for me, it's learning to surrender that planning part of me, right? So, what's something that you'd recommend for me to start doing in order to surrender that planning part of me?
It's funny that you said that because I was just thinking that. So, like, for example, it's okay to still plan, but
Hmm.
don't plan out the details. So, like, what do I mean by that? Like, if you're planning a trip, let's say you're going to the Grand Canyon, which is what I did. I knew I was getting to the Grand Canyon, but I didn't plan anything around that. Like I knew my destination, but I didn't know the details. And that's where you allow yourself to just flow. So that way your body starts getting used to it because if you go into the drastic mode of like I'm not going to plan anything, then you might see other feelings come up like anxiety, frustration, because you're like, oh my God, this is actually more harder than I thought it was going to be. Like, this is not fun. But like, if you're planning out your day, maybe just put like 2, 3 top things that are priority, but then let the rest of your day flow out. 3 top things,
Love that.
max, but nothing else, and just let yourself flow. And if the task doesn't get done, which I'm still learning, right? Again, like when it comes to work stuff, but if you're planning a fun thing and stuff like that, or even if it's like work things that aren't a high priority and it's not done because maybe there was something else, maybe where your doggy wanted to play with you or someone called you and it kind of just backtracked time, just honor it. Just be like, it's okay because that's what was supposed to actually happen instead versus me finishing the task. Allow what experiences come up from that. And I only say that because, the girls know this about me. I like schedules, they keep me on track. But when we had to cancel a recording date for ourselves, that Saturday was actually so beautiful because I got to spend quality time with my husband. We got to explore, we got to go shopping, which I haven't done in a while, and I got to enjoy the day. And it was just so beautiful. So beautiful. I got to experience it and none of it was planned, but I allowed myself to just be present. And I think that's the whole point. Allow yourself to be present. So hopefully that helped, Lupe.
Yeah, yeah, it did.
I love that. Okay, Edie's, how can people connect with you and what do you've got going on?
Yes. Okay. Well, I'm so excited that you asked. Like, there's a lot of new things that are brewing up in my world. So be, in tune with all of that. Cause where you can catch me is on Instagram, obviously at Rising with Edie's. There I have all the links to be able to access, my content, my wisdom. And if you like to work with me for one-to-one coaching, my link is there. Currently only do one-to-one coaching right now. And I do that intentionally because I do believe that your surrender story is going to be different and it needs to be personalized. And so when we work together, we're going to personalize all of that and create actionable items that are good for you in this season. And it's exciting to see what you guys will come up with and how you guys grow because that's the most fulfilling part of the job is working one-to-one and seeing all of those outcomes. I actually just dropped also a newsletter. So if you want to catch
Yeah,
all of the juicy stuff,
so
unfiltered
good.
stuff of what's going on in Edie's world and surrendering tips and all the things, please subscribe to that because I'm so excited to drop all the juicy gems that are coming forward. Like I've already been writing and it's so much fun. Yeah. And then there's another thing that's coming through. So again, if you want to know what that thing is brewing and what that's going to be, stay tuned because I haven't dropped any announcement yet, but it is coming. It's coming. It's coming. So yes, but you guys can find me there at Raising with Edie's. If you are interested in working with me, I'd love to have you. The first session is free, so it's just a 30-minute connection call. So I get to know you, you get to know me, and then we get to see if we're a good fit together. But yeah, y'all, don't let the surrendering scare you. Just remember that there is joy within the surrender as well.
I love that. I love that. And the suspense is
I
killing me. I
I know.
wanna
I
know
was
what's
like,
coming.
it's brewing, y'all.
It's
So I'm
brewing. Oh my
excited.
gosh.
I'm
I
excited.
love it.
I
I
can't
love
Yes,
wait.
it.
I can't
yes,
wait.
y'all. But
Thank you,
thank
Edie.
you. Well, thank you guys for having me and to, share my
Of
wisdom and
course.
story. Yes, but thank you so, so much for having me. And again, if you guys need anything, you guys can always reach out on to me. Wow, I can't even speak now because I'm all excited.
So excited.
Yeah, yes, reach out to me and I will be there for you guys.
Yeah. And
Yay.
Yes.
ladies, remember to stay lit.
Yes. All right, ladies. Stay
Bye.
lit. Bye.
Thank you for joining us today on Lit Podcast. We hope this conversation has ignited a spark within you so that you keep embracing your journey.
Remember, transformation takes time, but every step brings you closer to the life you're meant to live. If you enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, and leave a review.
Let's continue this journey together. Until next time, stay lit and keep transforming.